Hello Dragonflies. Today's story is one of my favourites. It's called Custer and it's actually based on a true story about a horse. It's a little bit like the Ugly Duckling story in that this horse didn't feel he fitted in until he found a way. Let's see what happens. Deep in the heart of the countryside, on a farm tucked away in the trees, there lived a young colt, the son of Cotton Lord, the most magnificent stallion in the country. The farmer was very proud of his young horse, and he called him General Custer after the famous soldier noted for his courage and bravery and strength. But this particular Custer had no great ambition in life. He preferred to take things easy and spent his life roaming, wandering around with his friends, the cows, doing very little except for the things that cows do. Almost all the things that cows do. But when the cows were being milked, Custer was busy thinking about the most important thing in his life, his stomach. For Custer, no food was too difficult to reach, and he soon found a way of opening the door to the farmhouse kitchen and helping himself. Eventually, he grew so fat that he couldn't even squeeze through the door. Something had to be done. So with a heavy heart, the farmer sold him to a riding school where he would learn to be a proper horse. But Custer learned very little. His new companions were not at all friendly. Even the small ponies bared their teeth at him. And they lashed out with their hooves and he ran away, whinnying for his friends with the cows. After all, he thought he was a cow, and he'd been very happy being a cow. He didn't want to be a horse at all. During the cold winter, Custer walked alone. He wandered around, scuffing his hooves, his head hanging low, and a faraway look in his big, sad eyes. His coat grew dull. It was nothing like the rich chestnut of his father's. It was pale and shaggy, and his mane stuck up on end. Worst of all, he'd been given a new name. Cowardy Custer. The school could do nothing to lift his spirits. He felt lonely and abandoned. But at last, someone from a nearby village showed pity on him. And in the spring, he was moved to a new home by the sea. He had a stable of his own and a lot of good food, which he learnt to share with his new family of animals. But Custer didn't really belong. During the long, dark nights, he pined for his real family, the cows. There he is, looking very sad, where a cat is trying to keep him company, but he doesn't look very happy, does he? One misty morning, Custer stepped out of his stable to find that he was not alone. In the far corner of his field stood a strange and beautiful creature. A wild grey mare was hiding in the hedgerow. Her name was Minto. She'd been captured from her home in the depths of the forest and had been sold at market. She was safe now. Her life had been spared, but she was still terrified by her ordeal. She stood there shaking and trembling with fear. Custer kept his distance, careful not to frighten her. At dusk, she was put into a stable next to Custer. But warmth and comfort meant nothing to Minto. She was a wild horse, used to sleeping out in the open. Throughout the night, she kept Custer awake with frantic pacing around her hooves, and she tried to break out. Custer became restless and anxious. Somehow, he understood that she was a creature who needed to run free. Unlatching the stable doors with his teeth, he released her into the night. But for Minto, even this was not enough. She looked longingly to the hills, and Custer untied the field gate and raced after her across the heath. They galloped far away and over the hills. Dawn came and the two horses were still running. Minto raced with the wind to shake off her memory of her capture and imprisonment. But as she reached the hilltops, she stopped. She looked out across the sea. Here was more wilderness than she had ever known. In a second, Custer was off again. Now he would take the lead and show Minto the open spaces where she could run free. As he galloped with her, he began to understand what it meant to be a horse. He stayed close, whinnying softly to her to warn her when danger was close, and muzzling her gently to reassure her. Slowly, she became calm, and she began to trust him. And as their day drew in, Custer set off down to the beach for home, knowing that now she could trust him and she would follow him. The villagers had been out all day searching for the two horses, and there was a joyful welcome awaiting their return. Everyone noticed the difference in Custer. He walked now with a spring in his step, his head and tail held high. After all, he had new responsibilities. It was to be a new life for Minto, and he must help her to change. It was to be a new life, and a good one, but no one could hope to tame Minto's spirits. She even taught Custer the ways of the wild, how to gallop like the wind and buck like a bronco. In return, Custer showed Minto some of the benefits, the good things about being friends with humans, and in time she lost her fear and began to settle into her new home and a new life with Custer. By the end of the summer, the two horses were inseparable. No one could part them now. When winter came round again, Custer and Minto were moved into a new field with a wood of tall trees for shelter. It was like Minto's forest home, but set high on a hill overlooking the cliffs and the open sea. As for Custer, he finally learned to live up to his name. With a silver mare at his side, he had grown into a strong and powerful palomino with a coat that shone like autumn gold. Even the general would have been proud of him. And each day, a long line of cows would slowly wind its way down the hill to the dairy. Custer would look up and sigh deeply. All that seemed like such a long time ago. And that is the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it, Dragonflies. See you next time.